Welcome to episode 74 of Rubbish Talk with myself, Alasdair.
And myself, Jane Bond.
And this week, Jane and myself are going to chat about litter and responsibility. And that's in the back of people not quite knowing how to use litter bins properly, I think is the general message. So we have a good old chat about litter, duty of care, responsibility for both public and businesses and so on. So that's what we're going to chat about today. But first, brief news. And the first one for me is a bit depressing. It is the EU plastics industry has warned that because of falling demand, rising costs, regulatory pressures, they're going to be forced more and more businesses out of business effectively. And they warned that by the end of 2025, Europe is likely to close at least 1 million tonnes of recycling capacity. We've highlighted that the last few times in Rubbish Talk about plastic recycling facilities in UK closing. So a bit of depressing news there, Jane, that doesn't seem to work. And it's partly due to low price imports of recycled plastics coming into the EU as well. So not good news.
Well, I think I've got some good news because I was looking on one of the websites the other day and it showed that Plastic Energy, which is a company in London, produces first recycled oil at Dutch advanced recycling plant. So what they're doing is it's pyrolysis oil and it's being called tack oil. I don't know why tack oil, but anyway, tack. Must be some anyway.
That'll stand for something, Jane.
Yeah,
sure.
I know. It must stand for something. And it's made from hard to recycle post-consumer plastic waste that would otherwise be lost to landfill or incineration. So I just think that's just a really good thing because you're taking your hard to recycle, all those, really difficult things, and you're turning it back into oil. And, if we can use that, ultimately, if we can't recover it, or we can't reuse it, at least we can take that right back to the oil. There's no point, we don't have to go and not harvest oil, but drill for oil. And we can actually turn it back to its virgin product. I think that's brilliant.
By the looks of they're expecting a full commercial production later in the year. So that'll be an exciting one to watch. There was a similar one I spotted by QM Recycling Energy, who've been granted a small waste incineration plant permit for a plastics to oil plant in Kent. So they're hoping that their operations are going to start process up to 5 tonnes of plastic waste per day converted into oil. So it looks like similar technology, but on a much smaller scale maybe. As always with these, we'll put the links onto the show notes if anybody is interested in digging a bit deeper than, the few comments myself and Jane make, then these links will be available to all, either in the show notes or sign up to a newsletter.
Yeah, no, we'll keep an eye on that because that's definitely looking like it's a good way of dealing with your hard to recycle plastics. The other one I've got here, DEFRA, to reform waste carrier, broker and dealer system. So they're going to be revamping it and having environmental permits or registered exemptions for your waste carriers, which is quite interesting because it looks like it's similar to what's happening under the new Scotland regulations, environmental assessment regulations. So that'll be worth looking into as well.
Yeah, no, it's by the looks of it, it's big changes, and it does seem it's similar. As usual, it'll be different in Scotland thing, just to make it complicated for people work across the borders. But that's life. We've had to get used to that over the last few years. One of the things I always have a little bit nervous about, quite often these things are promoted as all about waste crime. And I think there's a real danger for the regulators to view everybody in the sector as a waste criminal. And I think the challenge is a lot of our customers, that we deal with on a day-to-day basis are having to compete with the criminals. And that's the challenge, They're facing really real commercial pressures from the criminal side. And I think that there is a danger that because there is this huge amount of criminal activity, because of the revenue they can make in the sector, that everything's viewed as a criminal. And sometimes, a compliance issue on a site is not criminal. A compliance issue is a compliance issue, and the regulator needs to regulate that to address that. But, 9 times out of 10, that's not criminal behaviour. And I think sometimes because of the emphasis on the waste crime, I think that sometimes gets lost. So it'll be interesting how these things pan out, because it's obviously going to be big changes for lots of people. And I think one of the other ones that I always, my old hobby horse is quite often is not the waste sector that creates the problem. It's the customers that create the problem. And a bit more focus on customers complying with the waste regulations would be really good.
I think as well,
So,
going after the people who are already regulated, a lot of them are trying to do the right thing. And, some of them perhaps, fall by the wayside a little bit in some areas. But, there's massive waste crime out there that's not regulated. And it might be easy to go after the regulated guys, but can we not go after the real illegal waste crime guys?
I know from talking to SEPA, I think one of their challenges is sometimes they are going after the waste crime, but quite often they're restricted in what they can share publicly. So they'll be doing investigations behind the scenes and so on. They'll be doing work, but it's difficult for them to share what's happening. So for the outsiders looking in, it looks like nothing's happening, and that is one of the things the sector has fed back to SEPA and said, look, if you do get, for our positive stories where you've gone after people, then let's share that around the industry so the industry knows. But, I suppose the industry's got a bit of a thing as well in terms of them feeding in the intelligence as well to the system. So, yeah. It's difficult. It's only going to get worse. The higher the tax goes, the more expensive it gets to put waste out. I spotted a thing the other day, somebody shared, in fact, I think it was Jill, one of our staff members, shared a thing about North Ayrshire Council changing the rules about the bulky uplift collection. And this is to do with pops waste and furniture. So basically they're saying if you're putting out furniture and non-furniture, we need to do 2 separate collections. So the whole Facebook page comments were full of, this is just the council charging more money. Books we've talked about, we'll share the links in the show notes. I think that was all we had, Jane, this week.
Just a short one.
And it's really just over to you and me chatting about litter and responsibility and where we are with it. And probably we're maybe a bit, certainly my views are a bit sometimes controversial. So if there's people out there disagree with us or have various points to put, then quite happy sharing these comments and replying. Quite often, I know I certainly find if people do comment on things, that often gives us an idea for a future episode or a future topic. So we welcome feedback, whether it's good, bad, or poor. So
and if you do want to come on and debate that with Alasdair, we can have a debating competition.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So this week we're going to talk all about litter and taking responsibility for your waste that you generate. And why are we doing that? We're doing that because I put up a TikTok video about all the crap that was left in Ayr Beach after a sunny weekend, and got lots and lots of comments that it was to do with the bins being full, to do all sorts of nonsense. In reality, it was down to people not taking responsibility for their own waste.
I did exactly the same thing, except I didn't take the photograph. We had I live in Ingleton, and on our litter bins, so on our Facebook page, there was this photo taken of the bins outside the shop, full with all this litter, all these bottles and stuff on top. And the caption was, "Why don't the council provide big enough bins?" I was like, I don't normally do Facebook rants or Facebook wars, but I went into battle. I did. And I said, it's people's responsibility to move their own waste, blah, blah, blah. And so many people agreed with me. And then I sent the post to Alasdair, who then decided to put it on TikTok.
Put it up on TikTok.
Fortunately, the guy who put it on initially, his name wasn't on it, or I would have really been in trouble.
No, I did check. I checked. And we're not the only one that posts. So a regular listener to the Rubbish Talk podcast, Kate Rayner. She was in Edinburgh recently and had exactly the same scenario. A bin had lots of litter put on top of it, and as she turned round, she looked down the street and all the bins around were empty or still had space in them. And then Andy Williams, who is the head of service at Edinburgh Council, he came up with, he's got a favourite litter bin. And the reason it's his favourite litter bin is it's a two-sided bin, so there is basically a bin at either side, and it's in a very busy area, in a station I think it is, and constantly frustrated that one side of the bin is always overflowing, while the other side of the bin is usually empty. So that's why it's his favourite, in inverted commas, favourite litter bin.
Oh well, fair enough. Yeah. So what should we be doing, Alasdair? Why is this wrong? Apart from the fact that it makes a horrendous mess.
Let's go right back to basics. So in the UK, in UK waste law, there is a thing called duty of care, which is a legal requirement under the Environmental Protection Act 1990. And that probably comes from, effectively, before that, Control the Pollution Act, 1973. Is that right, Jane?
74.
I'm going back a while here. And this was all to do with waste legislation, both for environmental reasons and usually in the UK, it was also to cut down harm to environment, harm to human health from rodents, getting into waste and so on. So basically this duty of care applies to anyone who produces, imports, carries, keeps and treats or disposes of waste. So that is you, me and everybody else in society, because we all buy things and we all have waste. And basically, simple terms, it requires us all to take reasonable steps to make sure our waste is managed properly from the moment it's produced to the moment it's finally disposed of. So that's what we've all got to do.
So that's everybody. So it's not just the waste. When you put your waste out, it's not the council's waste. It's still your waste. So when you put that bottle on top of a bin, it doesn't automatically become the council's waste. It's still your waste. That's what you've done with it. So, and that's important to make sure you put it in the right place. So in realistic terms, it means don't put it in the wrong place. But also the big thing here, which I don't think a lot of people realise, is when you're having your house done, when you have your kitchen or your bathroom or whatever, and your kitchen man says, it's all right, I'm going to get Joe Bloggs down the road and he's going to bring a skip and we're going to chuck it all in that. It's fine. Then he's going to take it away. And you go, oh, right, okay, how much is that costing me? Oh, Joe only cost 20 quid. But if you go to somebody else, they'll cost you about 80 quid. So, Joe's a good man. Right, okay, fine. So you're thinking, yeah, I got
80 quid. When was last time you got a skip, Jane?
Look, it's just
probably more like 280 quid nowadays.
Like, it's just for illustration purposes. So
okay.
So what happens is Joe comes, he takes it away, fine, and then what happens is somebody finds that waste in a lay-by somewhere or whatever, and it's got your name all over it. So the police or SEPA will come back to you and say, right, okay, well, you dumped this rubbish. What's going on? And you'll say, oh, no, I didn't. I gave it to Joe Bloggs. Did you check that Joe Bloggs was going to do with it what he was supposed to do with it? Oh, no, it's fine. The builder said it would be fine. But it's still your waste. So, that responsibility comes back to you. You should have checked that the builder was giving it to a reputable person and taking it to a reputable place. And nobody realised that. You don't realise that the responsibility is with you as a householder to make sure your waste goes to the right place.
And how can public do that, Jane?
Well, they can ask. They can say to the guy, can you tell me where you're taking it? Where's your waste recovery plan? Or your waste recycling plan even? Or your waste disposal plan? Where are you taking it? And how's that work?
And they should be registered as a waste carrier as well. So if that's Scotland, they should be registered with SEPA. Down south, it should be Environment Agency. That does not mean automatically that they're doing the right thing with the waste, because to register for waste carriers is something like £180 for 3 years. So it's not exactly that big a bar to enter, but at the very least, if you've got somebody removing your waste, they should be registered as a waste carrier.
And that's all changing as well.
I know SEPA's had a big campaign about when you see these signs in the lamppost about clearing your junk, clearing your waste. Quite a lot of these are not properly licensed in terms of waste carrier, and they're also the ones fly tipping. So SEPA has done quite a big campaign about trying to get these Facebook ads and Instagram ads and so on pulled down as much as possible. But ultimately, as a householder, it is your responsibility to make sure the waste is going to a properly approved facility. And generally, if it's too cheap to be true, then you can be pretty sure it's not going to where it should be.
So if it's around about £80, it's probably wrong. You're looking at around about £280 for us to get.
That's what I was trying to tell you.
I know. Well,
absolutely. I suppose that's the chat. Go back 5 or 6 years and I go, it was £80, whereas £280 for a skip seems like a lot of money. But as we've talked about this before, landfill tax £126 a ton. They've got to send a truck to you with an empty skip. They've got to take your full skip back. To actually make money out of doing it for £280 per skip is actually quite challenging, and sometimes what the public don't quite understand. So that's the responsibility for householders. Equally, if you operate a business, you've got a similar duty of care. You must secure your waste safely and securely. So you're not meant to have leaky bins. You're not meant to have side waste. You're not meant to have bins that can be raked open by seagulls and so on. And again, you've got a similar requirement that you can only pass on your waste to an authorised waste carrier or a licensed facility. And you must actually keep evidence you've done that in the form of duty of care notes. And you must do that for 2 years. So we talked previously on TikTok account, South Ayrshire Council have recently put stickers on bins in certain locations saying it is an offence to put commercial waste in the bin. And that is because there's one in particular right beside a B&B, and obviously the B&B owner has been putting commercial waste in the bin. So they've stuck a big sticker over the top of it. Back to whether you're public or business, you've got to take reasonable steps to prevent your waste from ending up in an illegal site or being fly tipped. So, and I think sometimes you're right, Jane, that public don't realise that.
No,
in their
people
mind,
don't
it's
know
just
that.
waste. It's just something they want rid of.
Yeah. And I think, a lot of it is around understanding and education, and people don't know about it. Ignorance isn't an excuse under the law, but, it's just making sure people are aware of it. Because, if you've got your overflowing litter bins or your waste at the side, you put your barbecue on top or whatever, then, it can escape, it can blow away, it can be accessible by animals and birds and rats and God knows what else. And, with that barbecue on the top or your vapes in there, there's a potential to cause a fire, which we've already seen has been lots of issues and problems with waste and fires recently. And then you could get fined.
And how much is the fine?
Well, I've got here £80 fixed penalty notice. So if you drop litter, you could get £80 fixed penalty notice, which means you've got no argument. You just need to pay it.
Well, so if you litter or if you leave waste at the side of a bin, that is an offence because you're not securing it. Yeah, against animals. I was very tempted to take a little TikTok video this morning, actually, Jane, because I was walking along the beach. It had been a sunny weekend, and the beach was actually in quite good condition this morning for some reason. They might have been listening to the episodes.
Well done, South Ayrshire Council.
Taking the rubbish. Well, exactly. But there were the usual seagulls prowling about. And I don't know if you've been at a beach recently, certainly on the West Coast, there are loads and loads of jellyfish have been washed up.
Really?
So these two seagulls were eagerly pecking away at these jellyfish, which I'm not sure are that tasty for a seagull, but obviously they had no human scraps left, so they were pecking away at the jellyfish. So
well, they had nobody walking around with an ice cream or fish and chips.
I maybe should have. So in the back of all our litter rants, I decided to do a little bit digging into some of the figures, and some of the figures are pretty depressing. According to Zero Waste Scotland, Keep Scotland Beautiful, they reckon there are 250 million easily visible items dropped as litter in Scotland every year. That's just bonkers. And there are 67,000 events of fly tipping of waste. And they reckon way back in, I'm not quite sure if it's been done more recently, but the last I could see was 2013, Zero Waste Scotland did some research, and they estimated it was £53 million in public money spent clearing that up every year.
Wow.
I know I would rather see £53 million spent on, better schools, better leisure accommodation than going out and picking up litter.
Yeah, that's a bit shocking.
So in terms of the numbers, it's huge. So in terms of fixed penalties, it's all changed recently. So fixed penalty for litter in Scotland is £80, and fixed penalty for fly tipping is £500. I would say £500 is probably far too low, because if it's going to cost you £280 for a skip or a ton of rubbish in terms of landfill, that's £126, then it's far too low. But that came into effect on the 1st of January 2024. So I've got a wee idea for UK government's a bit short of cash these days. So 250 million pieces of litter at £80 a time, that's £20 billion we could recover for the UK economy. There we go. We just need to appoint some litter wardens and set them a target of 10 a day, and we're away.
So how many have been reported then? How many fines have there been? Do you know?
It looks like not that many. So for fly tipping, there appeared to be 3,317 issued, but they estimated that was just 1.16% of all incidents, and only 51 cases were actually referred for prosecution. So our success rate here seems to be extremely low, but 67,000 fly tipping events a day, it seemed a lot to me. That equates to 183 per day in Scotland. So that means every local authority, and 32 local authorities in Scotland, are getting 6 fly tipping events every single day.
Seems a lot.
Now surely,
actually.
if there's that many, if we're really being serious about this, there should be far more fixed penalty notices issued. But I suppose the challenge with fly tipping is how do you catch them?
What it is, though.
How do you find out?
You know what the argument against it is? Oh, well, all the council have got to register on them. We've got to go and book our slot. And, we just want to go when we want to go. We don't want to have to book our slot. So we get there and we can't do it. So where are we going to put it? We can't take it back home with us. That's all the excuses people have a lot of the time.
Do you think that's a valid excuse, Jane?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But the amount of times I've heard, oh yeah, well you've got to make an appointment at the skip now, and you're like, well, yeah, and your point is. So anyway, what about littering fines?
Littering didn't seem any better. We seemed to back in 2013-14. We issued 797, but in 2022 to 23, we issued 6.
My goodness,
Which
6?
seems like we're not. It seems like we're not even trying.
So who's responsible?
You just need to walk in the highest.
Yeah, who's responsible for issuing these? Is it a local authority? Is it SEPA? Is it the police?
It's local authority. So local authorities are the duty holders, and they're free to determine how best to fulfil their duties.
So we want litter police.
Challenge local authorities. Well, I think the challenge local authorities have is their budgets are squeezed, and this is probably seen as a side issue. My argument to this: if you can issue an £80 fine, you could quite easily wander around town for a couple of hours and issue 10 £80 fines.
Yeah, absolutely.
Easily. But you do need to probably be a certain size and shape of person to confront the public and apply a £80 fine to them.
But is it not
you need the right?
Is it not the same idea as parking fines? People don't like parking fines either, and you have a lot of violence or aggression against parking attendants as well. So it's the same. This is antisocial behaviour, never mind just parking your car in the wrong place.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I remember this is probably going back 20 years ago, I was down seeing a colleague in Stoke-on-Trent Council, and they were having a massive campaign about littering, and they included littering and billboards and signs on lampposts and all the rest. So if you, in that council area, if you put a sign up on a lamppost, you got a fixed penalty notice on you every time there was a sign up. So if you're at the moment of the year, there's a fencing contractor or a roofing contractor got signs up every place. So every single one of these would be a fixed penalty notice. And the minute you start doing that, the word goes round that that's what you're going to do. The number's there so you can find out who it is. So what they used to do was, I was in the car with them, and the car in front, a cigarette butt got thrown round out the window. He got at the time it was one of these dictaphone things that people probably don't know what they are, young, but basically a voice recorder. So he just read out the vehicle registration number, where he was, and what time it was, and that was him. He passed that to the secretary, and a fixed penalty went out to that person. Now, up until recently in Scotland, that was a bit of a problem because in the past, so in the Circular Economy Scotland Act 2024, there's now a civil penalty for litter thrown from vehicles, and that goes to the keeper of the vehicle, rather than in the past what used to happen was, well, I wasn't driving the vehicle, it was somebody else. So now if you litter out of a vehicle, it goes to the keeper of the vehicle, and so the fixed penalty goes to the keeper. So it's perfectly possible that council could set up a camera. There's fancy kit with cameras now. You can have a camera at a junction, and watch for, take the registration number, check the how much litter's going out. Another one you can do is if people go to, for example, McDonald's, the receipt is normally stuck to the bag, and you can actually track that back and go and get the McDonald's or the KFC or whatever, check the security cameras and see which vehicle picked up that McDonald's. And you wouldn't need to do that very often to then start getting the word going around. Hang on a minute here, if I chuck out my McDonald's bag onto the street, then I'm going to get an £80 fixed penalty. So I suppose in answer to the question, Jane, why we're not doing more, I have no clue why we're not doing more. Well, I do. I think it's down to cost, but I would say there's a revenue earning opportunity here in most councils if you approach it correctly. But there is an issue, I believe, with non-payment of fines. So the fines are issued by the council, and then they struggle to actually enforce payment. So there's a bit of thought that these fines should actually come from fiscal, and then the fiscal can enforce payment. Otherwise, it's a bit of a waste of time.
But is that not, they're still not the same as, because the council enforce the parking fines. So, would they not have the same recovery process as parking fines then? Because you tend to pay tend to pay your parking fines if it's come from a local authority, local council. I don't know.
You would tend to think. My personal view of it is, I don't think we're robust enough for this. I think we're just. Again, I put up a TikTok of local pubs in the air, and you look out, the street in front of them is covered in cigarette butts.
Yeah.
To me, in the past, that would have been, litter enforcement going in to see the public in and saying, hang on a minute, you've got to take a bit of responsibility for your users who you're serving drink to, and then go and stand outside smoking.
Yeah.
And there's good pubs have a little metal bucket outside with some sand in it for the cigarette butts and so on, but there's also lots of pubs don't do that. They don't take responsibility. Maybe that's where the litter enforcement need to go out and start enforcing.
Because a lot of it, you see it on the roads, don't you? You see it on the verges of the motorways, and particularly at roundabouts. I don't know why people have this thing about throwing stuff out at roundabouts. Do they slow down and think, I'll just chuck me bottle out at the roundabout? So that,
I don't even understand. I don't understand the mentality of throwing something in my car to put in a verge. I just don't get it. I don't see why I can't drive home and park up and put it in my recycling bin.
I don't know.
Bamboozle. It's just I can't cope with it. I do actually really struggle with that logic of throwing it out a window.
I remember I had gone for a cycle, and I'd come around the corner, and there was this car sitting there, and obviously I had McDonald's or Burger King or whatever, and it was just sitting there eating a burger, and then I saw him just open his car door and put all the packaging down on the floor and then close the door again, and I'm like, really? So I went out to him and knocked on his window, and I said, excuse me, you've dropped your stuff. And he said, oh right, yeah, I'm sorry, I was going to take it away, I've just put it there, I was going to take it away when I leave. I'm not sure whether he did or not. I didn't actually cycle back to check, but yeah, I I very much
That was quite brave of you.
I was.
That was quite
I
brave
was
of you.
very brave. I was very brave, actually.
I've been, but I think I've told this story before. So there was a house along the street from me that was rented. This guy who lived in it had a big van, and every day he obviously drank Lucasade for his lunch or when his van. He just used to open the door and kick the bottle out. So wherever he parked his van, there was always about 20 or 30 Lucasade bottles at the curbside. So I came home one night, I walked by, and I was fed up with it. So I actually picked up every Lucasade. I worked out which house he was actually in. I picked up every Lucasade bottle and put it in his front garden. I then, about 2 days later, noticed there was a security camera fitted.
Yeah.
Probably taking a video of me. So I'm not quite sure the security camera. I still don't know to this day whether the security camera was a new addition or whether it was because I'd put all these Lucasade. But you know what? There was not another single Lucasade bottle left to the side of the curb after that.
Well, fair
And I was
enough.
just
It
like,
worked then.
What's the logic? So we're talking about roads there. So in Scotland, the responsibility lies between the local authority and with Transport Scotland. So litter on motorways and special roads is Transport Scotland, and the rest of the roads are local authorities. Now, if you want to find out a bit more about litter on roadsides and whether Transport Scotland and their contractors are actually complying with the law, have a wee listen to episode 11, where we had George Niblock on, and he has a constant hobby horse that both the councils and Transport Scotland aren't actually taking responsibility for clearing litter at the side of road verges. They're definitely worth a wee listen. And one of his pet things is quite often you'll see a road contractor cutting the grass at the side of the verge, and rather than it being one bottle, it ends up being one bottle that's cut up into about 50 different pieces. And he's pretty adamant that litter should be picked beforehand. And I suppose my theory with controlling litter is I think you've got to make it painful for the public to actually realise how much litter's there. You know, Jane, because you cycle around, I cycle and run around roads, the amount of litter at the side of the road is just horrendous. And I think we've got to... You know, the main road, my logic is you take the M8, Edinburgh Glasgow Road, and you just shut it one day just to pick up litter. And you just really inconvenience people when you tell them you're going to keep doing that until they stop throwing litter out of their car.
Yeah.
And
don't know whether you'll get away with that, but yeah. It
might piss off a lot of people, but it's this thing that, you know, I know Keep Scotland Beautiful, we've done surveys about a certain number of people never drop litter, etc., etc. If that's true, there's some people dropping a hell of a lot of litter when you see them out the south.
Yeah. So we've got, you said, we've got something here, Litter Knowledge Network. Is this something that has been set up or something through Zero Waste Scotland?
So if you do a bit of Googling around, you find the Litter Knowledge Network, which Zero Waste Scotland run. But if you actually go into Litter Knowledge Network, there's nothing on there about litter. Or if there is, I can't find it.
Right, okay.
It does point you towards that, and there is such a thing. There is a page titled Litter Knowledge Network, but it appears to be just awareness information about waste in general rather than anything specific about litter. So we're probably just depressed each other here about litter.
Yeah.
So in terms of how can you report things, so fly tipping, you can report directly to your local authority through dove.co.uk, and the council will probably not thank it at all. With fly tipping and so on, it comes down to whether it's council land or whether it's public land or private land. And quite often, some of the people that actually do quite a lot of work about fly tipping is actually the National Farmers Union, because a lot of their members are pretty badly affected by fly tipping. So there is quite a bit of guidance in there. And you remembered a wee programme, Jane, didn't you?
I did. I was just going to say, I think there's a pollution hotline as well from SEPA. It's not just about water, it's about waste and stuff as well. So you can report it along there. Yeah, I always
there used to be the dumb dump. You remember the dumb dumpers?
Yeah.
Dumb dumpers, but I'm not quite sure what happened to that.
Yeah, well, I remember there was a great programme. It was on Disclosure Scotland, and I kind of quote this quite a bit because I think it's quite interesting because it's about organised crime, and it's about fly tipping and what happens, when people get fined out. And it was on in 2022, and I've just tried to find a link to it, and I found the link to the crime gangs cash in and the story behind it, but it seems to be that you can't actually get hold of the Disclosure Scotland, the actual programme anymore, because it says it's not available, which I think is a bit sad. But one of the things that really caught me was the fact that people were just dumping waste. That were taking waste, like we talked about Joe Blogs before, taking waste and then dumping it in a trailer. And they had this thing about, in Lanarkshire particularly, they decided to just put all this waste in a trailer, close it up, leave it, and that was it, and walk away from it. But what happened was...
I saw one the other day, Jane, on LinkedIn. It was exactly that. They'd filled this trailer and left it at the side of a lay-by down south someplace.
Yeah, and then what happened was they were looking at it. It was SEPA and the police were doing investigations. So they found these black bags full of waste. And again, like I said before, they traced people's contact details and went back and said, well, it's your waste. Did you know who you were giving it to? So, yeah.
I think that's where it's a bit of a shame, Jane. I think that, I think potentially there's vulnerable people that are paying for waste to be removed, and then they're effectively being conned. So I think there are people in that category, but I think there's also people know full well that these people are not taking it to the right place. I think there's got a bit of a balance there, but it's a shame that's not around. I couldn't find the programme either. It's a shame it was not, but it was actually quite a good programme. I remember it quite vividly. So just to summarise, Jane, what's changed in Scotland in terms of litter? What's the main things that have changed?
Well, a new national strategy, the litter strategy, which was 2023 to 2029 action plan and all this sort of stuff. But again, I don't know whether there's been any update about that. And it was a detailed 2023-24 action plan. It's supposed to be refreshed annually. Haven't seen a 2025 one. I don't know whether... I think we're very good at writing stories, but not actually very good at doing anything about it. We can do strategies and policies until, kingdom come, but actually enforcing them and doing something about it is a totally different matter.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, the one that we have talked about, the change, the fixed penalty went up from £200 to £500. But I personally don't think that's enough. There should be a much bigger deterrent, and there should also the other big deterrent is if they had the powers to seize a vehicle. So if a vehicle's caught fly tipping, then they should be able to seize a vehicle, and that would be a very big disincentive to not be fly tipping.
Absolutely. And there's all these cameras for catching you speeding. Can they not catch you checking waste out as well? Can we not have that too? Can we not double up on these cameras?
There was a sign when you used to go off the motorway at just after Chancellor crossing Glasgow. There was a sign up there saying there was a camera being used for detecting fly litter. The place was covered in litter, so I don't think the actual camera was ever installed.
Yeah,
but to me, this power to charge the keeper of the vehicle, I think's really good, and I think if there was a concerted effort to actually push that out and actually start fix penalties on people, I think you would get a behaviour change. It's a bit like the speeding. People will continue to speed unless they think they're going to be caught.
Absolutely.
If they don't think they're going to be caught for littering, then they're going to continue doing it. So.
Yeah.
So I suppose to sum up exactly what you were saying, Jane, when I did a wee bit of research of this, there's loads of strategy documents, there's loads of chat, there's not very much about practical, how do you do this? Does a council get these litter enforcement people out there working? How do they make sure they get paid the fines? How do they step up the action? There's lots of knowledge and, certainly local authorities in Scotland in terms of how to do it because they've done it in the past. To me, it's just needing a bit of coordination between, the fiscal service, the local authorities, the police if necessary, and just how it's been done and who's sort of responsible for doing each bit. So I think going back to the figures, to me, 250 million items of litter every year is not acceptable.
No.
I think
it's just like it's a spend to save, isn't it? So you spend money on getting your a litter strategy in place, or no, not your strategy, but a litter person, to go round and let's start fining people, and then you get money in to save money on your actual disposal costs. So what can we do? What can we do about it? Basically, take your rubbish home, put it in the bin.
For the action for the public, then let's leave in a positive, Jane. Action for the public.
Take your rubbish home, or fold it really small and put it in the bin. I know.
Leave no trace, I would say.
Leave okay, no trace. Leave
and
no
if you
trace.
do see an overflowing bin, if you fold up your coffee cup, it actually is much smaller than a full coffee cup, or whatever it is you try to discard. So there you go. Leave no trace, and if you do need to put some in the bin, just give it a wee fold up and compact it down, and then you'll be leaving space for the next person. So there you go. A whole episode on litter and responsibility, Jane. Who knew we could talk this long about the
we tell you between us, Alasdair, we can talk for hours on waste. We just have to be stopped every so often. Well, Alasdair, have you got a suitable rubbish rant for us today? I haven't felt as strongly about anything this week.
Always got room for a rubbish rant, Jane, as you know. It's been one, actually we chatted about it earlier on. So one of the waste companies in Scotland, Serco, had a fire last Sunday. Now, I don't actually know, details are still in terms of what actually caused the fire, but I know from the sector, some of the sector meetings we go in, that the industry is facing a huge issue with fires, both in waste facilities and in vehicles and so on. So they estimate that something like 4 refuse collection vehicles are burning every day in the UK. Now, that wasn't happening 4 or 5 years ago. So the driver behind that is lithium-ion batteries, primarily from vapes, but it can be from some of the waste electrical and electronic equipment. So lots of equipment has small batteries in it, like your wireless earpods, all that type of stuff. So I think my rant here is, what on earth is the government doing in terms of pushing back at some of these producers to actually take a bit more responsibility for the waste they're putting on the market? We can't be burning down 4 refuse collection vehicles a day and keep pointing to the waste industry to do a bit more. And the fire at Serco was outside. Fortunately, it wasn't involving a building burning down, but it was a pretty significant enough incident that appeared in the national news. So, these producers are required to take these things back, but they're not doing it. And so the rant is, what on earth is government doing about this? And maybe it's not DEFRA, maybe it's the business department or whatever the name for the organisation is, to look at it and actually get these producers in a room and say, you're causing a lot of mayhem out in the sector. What do you think?
Yes, I think that's very true. I also think it's education as well on the public not to put these things in their bins.
That they don't put them in the bin? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps there needs to be more labelling or something like that, or an easier way, or when people buy something, it can, when they buy something from Tesco's, it could be clear that they could bring them back there when they're used, or something like this in the big stores, just to be saying, don't put it in your bin, bring it back, or whatever.
Things like vapes, to me, are the ideal thing for a deposit return.
Yeah, well,
you buy a disposable vape, but you get charged an extra £5 for it. And you get your £5 back when you take it back to the shop. So yeah, I just think it's part of the reason we set up the podcast was to try and share some of the difficulties in the sector. And I think the sector, I know there's loads of work. Serco, for example, will be under investigation about that fire, and they'll be getting asked to do all sorts of different things to try and manage the fire. But ultimately, the fire, in many, many cases with waste fires, the fire has been caused by something like a lithium-ion battery in the waste stream getting crushed and then causing the fire. Serco's not put that in the waste on purpose. A member of the public or somebody out there has done that, and Serco, to a certain extent, have got no control over it.
Yeah, you talk about frontline workers being the bin men, but they're not really. The frontline workers are actually who puts it in the bin in the first place, which is the public. And we need more education for them.
It probably ties in with the topic of today, which was litter and responsibility. So get the public doing the right thing. But I think,
Make it
if we're
easy.
going to push it onto the public, we should also be pushing it onto the producers who are putting all that stuff onto the market. They need to step up and take responsibility. So there you go. That was a fairly calm rant this week, wasn't it?
Relatively, yeah. Well done.
So that's us. That's us today. The next episode, we're delighted to have Andy Rees from the Welsh Government. So he is the head of waste strategy. So we had an excellent time having a chat with Andy, chatting through the recycling rates for Wales, which are sitting at something, from memory, 66.6%, which is, one of the top performing countries, not just in the UK, but in the world. So really interesting to chat to Andy and find out how they managed to achieve that.
Yeah, it was really interesting. So thanks for listening to us now. And we will see you again at 4 p.m. next week with Andy. We'll chit chat with Andy. And the next stage we're going to cover is disposal in our waste hierarchy.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode. See you again next Thursday at 4 p.m. Don't forget to follow, share with friends, and send us your feedback at hello@rubbishtalk.co.uk.